Cool. Well, Sangeeta, thank you so much for helping me with my project.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
You were just asking what got me into this.
Yes.
Would you believe a cure for social distancing?
Really?
Yeah. So I work from home,
Yeah.
even before everybody else worked from home.
Okay.
And, I was like, there would be like days without me actually seeing other people that weren't my family.
Uh-huh.
And so I was like, I need some type of project that would force me to go out and meet other people on a regular basis. And
Wow.
so my original idea was to interview people at Starbucks and at the mall and on the street. And if you look at all the interviews I did between
Mhm.
like December and the middle of March, they're all at those places.
Wow, because I saw few and it was like a wide variety. Like there was somebody from Russia, and then there was like, I was like, wow. Then I was trying to see, are you doing a research with NASA? But I couldn't find that. So I was like, okay, I need to ask him what was the motivation.
Yeah, so it's like just a personal. I mean, there's many different facets to it. Like one of it is the kind of like the personal growth side,
Yeah.
but then the other side is, this is a topic that I'm really fascinated about. And what do other people
Hmm.
think about it,
Yes.
especially non-space people? Like, what do they know about it? What do they think about it? How does it fit in their world? If they knew certain things,
Hmm.
how would they react to those things? That type of thing. So
But it is fantastic. Like I did go through your some of the posts. It is so fascinating to see. I'm sorry.
no
To see
worries.
how people just what do they think, and this just very general view of a layman on these questions you were asking. It was really cool.
Yeah, and I even had the benefit of going to the UK in February. So
Uh-huh.
I got to
Wow.
talk to people in London and in York and in Edinburgh, and it was kind of deep too. So there's like some interesting accents.
Yeah, so I probably have not seen all of them. That's why it's on my list. Whenever I get time, I'm going to go to the link and explore more.
Well, and some of them are a minute long, and some of them, I think the longest one was like 3.5 hours.
Seriously? No, I didn't see that. Wow. That's cool. That's the coolest thing I've seen.
So could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
All right. So I am a hardware engineer by profession. My name is Sangeeta Gupta. And currently I'm leading an engineering team. I work at Hewlett Packard Enterprise, and we make something called ASICs, which is like a chip or like an integrated circuit. So I'm part of this team which does cool, innovative things that goes in HPE servers. So very excited with my work.
Yes, and ASICs, application specific
Exactly.
integrated circuit.
Yes, that's
And
like absolutely the acronym. Yes,
the competitors, the ASICs, would be FPGAs, which are field programmable and could be
absolutely.
adaptable.
Yes, the only difference between an FPGA and ASIC is FPGA is very expensive, very costly. So to make it like affordable for the cost perspective, that's the main difference, which is why you cannot make complex circuits using FPGA um, and use it for millions and millions of copies. So, but we use FPGA to prototype our functionality.
And your ASICs, are they around like drive controllers or a motherboard? I mean, like what are you creating the ASICs for?
So our specific ASIC, like without revealing HP secrets, but they are for controlling or managing the health of a server. That's what our ASIC do. So if you Google something called ILO, it's called Integrated Lights Out. It's been like for decades now, and we are on multiple generations. We have done this project for. So that's the basic essence of the ASIC. It manages the health of a server, and takes preventive action when something happens, or informs the person or a person who's managing the server or the whole data center for that reason. So
That's awesome. My company is a big buyer of HP servers. So,
Oh
and
yeah.
and I worked on a recent project where we try to forecast how many servers we'll need,
Mhm.
and in like the order management piece, we've kind of added it so that like the vendor, like HP, could come in and put in like the ILO configuration and stuff, so
Wow.
that
So
like like the the site reliability engineer, all he has to do is find the place in the rack to put it and cable it up, and then just put into the system what the place is, and everything else is all software driven. So it's kind of
wow. So Nathan, this is the first time I've met a person outside of my work who knows something about ILO. So and you specifically said ILO. So I am part of the ILO hardware team, and then there is a whole software stack that goes on top of it. So
yeah. And honestly, I can't say I know that much about it. From my standpoint, it's just one field on a spreadsheet that I created an application to help manage. But
yes.
I did get to hear like the site reliability engineers and other people talk a little bit about why it's important to them. So I do
Yeah.
have a
So
little context.
So if you ever get to open a server, you'll see this small chip like 5 mm by 5 mm. It's like this small, but it is packed with like millions of gates inside it. But it says ILO on it, and that's what is on the motherboard of the server.
That's awesome. And allow for you to feel like you're right there at the terminal instead of
Yes,
actually
yes,
having to
yeah,
hook up
exactly.
a monitor and stuff. I remember, I've been in some data centers. I mean, I used to work at HP as well. And, we had those 6 go forward data centers that we consolidated down to. Um, and I remember, every single rack had like a monitoring keyboard. And
Yes.
now you don't even need that, right? I mean, you
No.
have to send somebody in there to,
Yeah,
um,
so it's an integrated KVM, so you can remotely manage it. That's the fascinating part of this chip, and it's getting better every generation.
that's awesome. And all because of you and your team.
My team, yes. I joined my team in 2000 when I didn't even know what it really means. And yeah, there are very smart engineers I work with, and I'm so grateful that I'm part of the team.
Um, and like, what are some of your hobbies?
One of my hobbies is gardening. So I love to grow things, and I experiment a lot, figure out how it grows, where it grows, and so I have a small vegetable garden, and then I have grown trees, and they did some fare well, some did not, and so that keeps me busy. And I love growing like seasonal flowers. Um, and the vegetable garden keeps me busy because you have to be planting every season or so and so time. And other than that, I love watching movies with my kids. I can watch anything. So
So about the gardening, anything special you're growing now?
so right now I have my mom told me about a cashew plant. I don't know if you have ever heard. So that I had a cashew pod, and I planted it, and I have a small plant that came out of it. But so that's a different, a totally different plant out of Houston. Probably the Houston climate may not favor it very well. So I grew it in a pot. I'm going to see how it grows. But other than that, I have like orange tree, and then I have a loquat, and then in my vegetable garden, I have like some of the herbs like basil, mint, cilantro, and then I have I don't know if you know, but there's a big, huge taro root. I don't know if you have seen it, but it grows as a big leaf. So in India, we use the root for making vegetable, but you can make some things out of the leaves too. So I have a variety of things like chili and then squash and yeah, probably those beans. So and
That
I have
is
a
awesome. I've tried gardening too, but
yeah
unfortunately, the weeds overtake it because I don't give it the
yes.
daily effort that you need.
So that's why you need it as a hobby. So I go out every evening, like on a stroll, and then I sit and, and I read. So you have to do it very regularly, otherwise they do overtake your yard. Yeah, so that's a
Yeah, and
constant effort.
I took out all the weeds just like a week ago, and so now I'm wondering what I should be planting right now, if there's anything. Any suggestions?
Yeah, so right now the heat is coming up, right? So it will be hard for you to put a seed, but if you get plants, like okra, this is a good time for okra. But if you try to seed it right now, it may take a while, but because they do very well in July, June and July when the heat is at its peak, okra is a good vegetable. And then I have squash growing, bottle gourd. Which we use very often. So those are some heat loving plants, but like cucumber and all don't fare very well in the heat. They need to have some shade. Um, and beans, if you like green beans, that's something which will love this time of the year.
Yeah, I can see that we're going to have some follow-up conversations on this topic.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I have grapes too. So the grapevine, like I just grew it out of, I just wanted to know how it does. And it just dies every year and comes back. Like right now it's in full bloom. So I think grapes are something which do very well in this climate.
Yeah, I've had a grapevine for like 3 or 4 years now, and this year was the first time that I noticed that were grapes on it, and it was such a amazing surprise. And
Wow.
then I also noticed that one reason I may not have noticed them before is we have some very happy birds.
Ah, okay. Yeah, so they are enjoying it. Yeah, somehow mine, I think either they are so well protected by these big leaves or it's a corner because the birds are not able to get to it. So like I have a vine climber behind that, like a maybe 4 foot by 4 foot kind of thing behind it, and it climbs and it is so thick that probably the grapes are all hiding behind. So it probably naturally happened. I didn't do much effort on that.
That's good. And but how do you get to the grapes?
Oh, I can because so I have planted it towards the fence side, but between the fence and where I have planted it, there is a space. So there is a vine climber like I planted right behind the grapes, but there is a space where there's a little gravel, so you can just go behind and pick it. But still, it is very thick right now with the leaves, so it is a hard. But I'm able to get inside and cut.
But the birds don't get in there.
No, no.
Okay, I'll have to try to do
That's
something like
probably,
that.
what I did was like I had two plants, one on each side, and they were like planted like maybe 2 feet apart, 3 feet apart, and they have mingled into each other. So it's like became a very thick bush.
That's that sounds great.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and you say you watch a lot of movies with your children. Like, what do you all watch?
So I can watch anything with him. Like because of my son, I got into the superheroes. So I love watching Marvel movies. Then my all-time favorite is Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. So I never used to watch Marvel movies, but as he was growing up, I got so interested. Now I have probably done all the series with him. But otherwise, I usually watch like if I go with my daughter, I can watch any animated movies. So I just love watching movies. They take you away for some time, and it's like it's a different kind of meditation, I think.
It's a magical place where things make
Yeah,
sense,
makes sense exactly. Yeah.
as opposed to our non-magical place where things aren't making sense.
Exactly right now. True, very true.
Um, so I have a question. What do you know about the first time we sent people back to the moon? Sent people to the moon for the first time.
Yeah, yeah. So I do know. I mean, I watch news very regularly as a kid too. So I knew about when people went to moon, and it was before I was born. And I used to participate in debates when I was in my school, and I remember writing something on female that time, like the role of a woman or something. And I was in fifth grader, and I was researching, and then I came across this name Valentina Tereshkova, and she was the Russian cosmonaut. So I wrote about her, and that's how I got into that. And I remember asking my mom that time about these two people who have gone to moon, and was it real? And And then I had heard, like, as I was growing up, I was always fascinated by this thing called NASA. And that's when I came to Houston. I never thought that I'll be in Houston, and that was the first thing I went to visit. So I did know, and I did not know that it will probably be a history, not during my lifetime when, for the second mission, or, for it wouldn't be a sustainable effort. I never thought of that, it will be something that will be halted, where, where a country like United States, how the world look up to you for advancement in science. So this is something which doesn't make sense to me. But then again, it's higher above my pay grade to see where resources should be applied.
Are they get replied? Are they get applied exactly where we all kind of think they should? It's just we're not part of the process, and
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't have like I really, I don't know where, since we are not part of the process, don't know exactly are they applied where it should be. But from my perspective, I would think we the way this country is designed, or the foundation, this should be a trivial thing.
I know, and it's interesting. The cost of going into space has actually increased over time instead of decreased, generally speaking, whereas the cost of pretty much everything else has decreased. I mean, the cost of computers, they've gotten cheaper and faster. Now we make phone calls to other states, and we treat them like regular local calls. Even
Exactly.
they
Yeah.
used to,
Yeah.
you had to have a long distance phone provider, and
Yes.
they would charge you by the minute. and
Exactly. Yeah. So in
and
this
we
digital age, you would think that things should be, and that's a good question. I mean, um, that why has space exploration is still so expensive, right? But is it because there is not so much competition? Because even if I look at my ASIC cost or the industry I work in, the cost is driven by how the competition is. If there is one person like Intel hogging the market, then of course the price of the processor will be higher. So
Yeah, and that brings up another point. Is AMD still making processors?
it is, yeah.
Okay.
Yes. And now ARM is another one which is coming in like big time in the server market. So that'll be good.
And ARM is an independent company, or is that like IBM, or what's?
ARM is an independent company. So like in your iPhone or any of these devices, the microprocessor is from ARM.
Okay, but I mean, if you look at the way we have historically approached space, it has been as a single national enterprise where the government would go and hire contractors and then pay them to build rockets and launch. And there's like no incentive to reduce cost, right?
Yes,
And
that's true.
there's nothing to measure the cost by. You don't know if you're getting a good deal or a bad deal. But there's been some little changes in this. One is in 2011 was the last shuttle flight that there
Hmm.
was. And since then, we've been dependent upon Russians to send our astronauts to the International Space Station. But NASA had a program called the Commercial Crew Program, where they were like, instead of us buying the rocket and paying for it to be built and flying it, we want to basically have commercial providers be developed, and we just buy the rides on them. We'll make sure they're still safe and that they meet our standards, and we'll review the engineering along the way. And as part of that process, Boeing and SpaceX were both selected to
Correct.
build this commercial crew thing. And just earlier this month, SpaceX launched the first two
Mhm.
astronauts to the National Space Station on it. Did you get to see that?
Yes, I did. Yeah, and I love the president's statement during that. You cannot be the number one in the world if you're number two in space. So I really applauded that.
Um, yeah, that's true. And they're trying to take that approach with other aspects of the space program, like going back to the moon. we know we're going to have to get like supplies to the astronauts. Well, even before that, we want to do a lot of science on the moon, right? We want to actually land, rovers and do scientific investigations that happen. And they created a similar program as the commercial crew called the Commercial Lunar Payload Services Program,
Okay.
CLPS. It's like CLIPS, that's how they pronounce it. And
Okay.
15 companies are part of that program. And every year, NASA pays for 2 missions to go to the moon on these programs. And they're just paying for their science instruments to be taken to the moon. And they don't dictate how the instruments, how the craft gets launched into space or what the craft is designed. It's like it's like a delivery service. You take my thing from here to there and I'll pay you this much. And then these companies can do whatever they want to with any extra capacity they have. So in 2021, we'll have the first 2 companies actually land things on the moon as part of this program. One is a Houston-based company, and have you heard of, I guess not, called Intuitive Machines. And the other company is a Pittsburgh-based company called Astrobotic. And the interesting thing about the Pittsburgh company is that in addition to delivering NASA's thing to the moon, they've done this promotional thing with DHL, the delivery service. And you can buy for like 400, 500, 600 bucks, depending upon the size. You can send something small to the moon on it for yourself.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So you can even get it back from there or something?
You can't get it back. It's a one-way trip.
It's a one-way trip? Okay. So it's like in the future, if I get to go or somebody in my generation gets to go, they can have my message there.
Exactly. So you can
That's
send like
cool.
a family heirloom, and then like your children or grandchildren at some point they may go on the moon and retrieve it or what have you.
Fantastic. I'm going to look up on that. I honestly didn't know.
Yeah.
That's
So
great information.
It's kind of neat. And so they're doing other things like this. I think this is going to drive down cost. And there's also another thing that's happened. We have internet billionaires now that like space.
Exactly. That's how I think that's what your point to your point that this can definitely make it more affordable and innovative. It cannot be this expensive as we innovate thing and figure out the better or optimized way of doing stuff. So yeah, unless we bring in like SpaceX, now that billionaire is interested, and there has to be like these kind of minds who have money and mind, so can fuel such explorations. Absolutely.
Yeah, and the goals of SpaceX versus Boeing and Lockheed Martin are completely different. SpaceX was ran by a guy who wants to build a city on Mars, and he's like, "This is what I'm committed to. I don't care what it takes to do it or anything else. We're building that city on Mars, right?" And then you have Lockheed Martin and Boeing. They're ran by your usual business types. They're like, we need to have profits this quarter, and next quarter we need more profits, and the quarter after that we need more profits.
Yes.
And
so you will say one is driven by passion, one is driven by survival.
Yeah, one's driven by passion, the other one's driven by profits. And the profits can work as long as there's competition to make them have to pursue the more improved thing as part of their quest for profits.
Absolutely. I believe that.
Like HP and Dell, do they really care about pushing computer limits to the end or not? And I would argue probably not, but they need to be better than the other guy. And so that competition keeps pushing them forward.
Yes, and that competition does lead to innovation too. They each other, you try to figure out that, okay, of course you have to do better than the other for sure and have a better quarter than other. That's definitely the goal of some people up high there. And then there is a level of engineering team where which doesn't care so much about profit in the quarter, but about what can we do next. So when I work so closely with this engineering team, you have it's very fascinating how these people who've been researching for 35 years, how they think.
Talking about researching for 35 years, and I'm not sure if you could tell me anything about this, but what happened to the MEM sister?
Memristor, yeah.
Member sister.
Yeah, so yeah, the memristor was the technology that HPE was pioneering, and I think the learnings from that, like I think that's what is on the web. The project got stalled because it's very expensive. It's not for commercial business yet, but the learnings they're applying to the next exascale computing systems.
That's awesome. Yeah, I remember that being like a big thing. I remember back whenever Meg Whitman was here, we used to have
Yes.
like those Star Trek episodes about you know, at the exascale computing and that whole thing. So
Yeah, so the group I work in, like at my VP level, one of the team was part of that, and my team is specifically on ILO.
that makes sense. So I get a question. Did you know that we were going back to the moon in 2024?
So I do know because I went to NASA last year with my kids, and there was somebody visiting, like a family member, and there it was like big bold thing, promise to the moon, and then there was something called Moon to Mars.
Uh-huh.
I remember it's written on the walls, and there was a clock ticking. I think that was for the Mars. But that's when I saw and in the news. But I would still say that it's not very widely published. It's not an information which is like you open the news and you see every day. Oh yeah, NASA was supposed to go. How far we are, or what's going on. Um, but I came to know from that trip.
Yeah, I could tell you it's not widespread. Out of like the nearly 200 interviews I've done so far, only about maybe 30, 35 people have actually known.
Yeah, and that's something missing, right? Like especially in our local news, NASA being like the pride of Houston, you would imagine like that it should be very, it should be very widely publicized. And these days, like publicizing information is not hard. Pretty much everybody is on social media, and like when I'm on Netflix, I love National Geographic. So you look for the documentaries, but I've never seen one on NASA. I was just looking after you talked. I couldn't find one, which is like, okay, this is our timeline. This is where we are going to be. This is where we are. Um, yeah, so that's something missing.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the people I interviewed even said, why is NASA keeping it a secret?
Yeah, true. And even in the school platforms, you will see the school students have no knowledge of this. Like or I don't know how many, but you'll see a very big chunk of it. And I remember last year, there was a telescope that was designed. I read it in the news. Remember that the first picture of the black hole? I don't know if you.
Oh, yes, yes.
What was it called? There was a name for that telescope where they gathered the telescope in various parts of the globe to combine one, so
Oh,
that
it's
they
like
can.
it's like a very large radio telescope, right? It's like they have
Correct.
like radio
Yeah,
receivers all over the world.
all over
And
the world, because it is so far. I mean, the black hole is so huge. In order to figure to get it out, you need this huge big telescope, and I have to go back and read. But that was something in the news, and my daughter had no idea. So I reached out to the principal and I said, do you know, when I was a child, I used to be the news reader of my school. So I used to come up with 5 points every day, the coolest thing I figured out, and would present it during the assembly time. And I told her that, can you do something like that on scientific news, on science news, um, and have a child or a teacher even say something like that. And I think they said, yeah, we'll look into it, but never went ahead. But I think that's another platform that's missing, I believe, today in the system.
that is an awesome idea. Just 5 exciting things about science that are new. I guess you had like this the first detection of like gravitational waves like 6 years ago. That was
Yeah,
a
yeah.
pretty neat thing too.
Exactly. So the kids are reading about, the mainstream academics, right? They are reading about science, like in what is gravity, and that's the kind of thing my daughter was learning. She's in elementary school. She's a fifth grader, but how does that apply directly to the everyday things that are happening around them? Is I think that is missing, which I thought I had a better knowledge when I was growing up because I was more aware of what was going in the world or in the news than the kids in this school. And I don't know the whole school system here, but that was something I wanted to improve. So I did reach out to the principal, but maybe it was I had to take more probably active role to push it into become part of the organization. So
You know, the thing that you're talking about and that transition from the time whenever we went to school to now, I wanted to toss an idea to you and see what you thought. Since it is so easy for anybody to get stuff out there, the volume of stuff is overwhelming, and it's very easy to expend all of your mental energy and focus and what have you on things that are very transitory. To constantly talk about this thing on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook and what have you. And before, you would still have the gossip, but the gossip required a lot more effort to communicate. And so it would have run its course and die, whereas now it can go on forever and increase its scope. But the things that were actually published in like newspapers and magazines, there was a real cost to doing that. And also there's like a limited amount. So like the bar it took to get it into a paper was there. And then you could start talking about, well, we have these three sources, they conflict with each other, which one's more credible and why. Now it's just, and everybody in the discussion could have read those three articles and actually do that. But now it's just like, it's like a deluge of not knowledge, but just like data, and overwhelming. And I was just wondering, what about that resonates with you and kind of how do you see it?
I would agree with that because there is a kludge of information, and this is probably the pros and cons of this digital age, right? Where you don't know what to believe and what is right and what is wrong. And even for the news channel, right, you pick two papers and they have totally different viewpoints and they can bias you one way or other. And um, I do agree that when I was growing up, probably if you physical newspaper you pick up, you would believe that the information that's cited there has gone through the proper sources, and you cannot just get to these big papers or journals. We used to read journals um, and magazines. But today, yes, there is conflicting information everywhere. And that was the one reason I remember the principal told me that it's very hard for students to filter the right information. So it was not that very easy for her to just say that, okay, go to this website or, pick up this paper and find three things for me. And that was a challenge. And I wanted to discuss with her further. So it does resonate with me.
And do you see anything on the horizon to change it to the better, or do you think it's going to continue to get worse?
That's a very good question, and I would. I think there has to be an awareness because I do worry of this digital age with my own kids too. They're being exposed to it at a very immature age, and how do they uh, get the right information? So unless it's so again, it lies on the responsibilities of those leaders who are leading these platforms to see how it can be more safer and secure from the information perspective. um, I I know data analytics is going to be a huge next transformation, or the next key innovation, and it's growing. So unless there is some innovation goes in there, I think it's going worse. But it's probably the awareness of parents and the society which would probably help it, or um, kind of bias it.
Yeah, I mean, but it's just amazing how difficult it is for parents or for adults to even manage it themselves. but then on top of that, having to manage it in the context of parenting, in the context of the whole school, you know, it's just like,
Yeah,
it seems like a very,
it gets out of hand very easily and very fast. And the social pressure kids are facing because of that is like, if you don't if you do not provide the platform to them, it's they're isolated from the community. They don't know how to interact anymore, or so there is no good way. The only one is like everyday mentoring them that how to use this information, and how not to get bullied by this, or you know how it's a huge it's a Herculean task, I think.
it is, yeah. And also, you know, talking about like the motivation of the private space companies versus the contractors. I mean, if you look at the leaders of these platforms, their number one goal is to have people on their platforms, which means that the more controversy there are, the more arguments, the more back and forth actually feeds in more into what they, you know, into what their end goals are, which is, you know, Facebook wants everybody on Facebook, and Twitter wants everybody on Twitter, and you know, and if we have something controversial that gets you all excited and make you like have to respond back, and then that makes other people respond back, then that's like good for them, you know,
Yeah.
but bad for all of us.
Yes, bad for all. Exactly. That's how it has to be. Like those political leaders, that's where they play a role. You know, there are those departments for a reason where, you know, there should be some regulations in place. I know, like from some of the projects that's going on, there is a huge task force that talk to this department of security, or DOE, with the government agencies. So I'm sure they are all very smart, very aware of all this, but I don't know, is it in their interest to regulate such things or put some policies, or it's, again, we're not part of the process, so it's hard to say.
Yeah, and also, I mean, talking about motivations of like politicians, are they really there to create a good society, or are they just there to stay in power and get elected the next period?
Yeah,
And
that is a very gray area. It's very personal. It in fact depends from person to person too. What is their motivation to get into politics?
you know, that's a good question. I mean, I think there's a lot of good people that are afraid of getting into politics because they're like, I want to make a change, but I don't want to put up with this constant battle or have every word that I say be taken and twisted. And I don't want my personal life to be the front page discussion of everybody.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, and it's just like, how do we get more people that we feel are correctly motivated into politics? I mean, like, what's that look like?
Right. And that's why first people have to stand up. That then only we can make a judgment and, you know, elect them. But if they're not even coming to the podium, then how do you even know? So as you said, there are several leaders like philanthropists, different billionaires. There is one Bill Gates, then then there is a Facebook guy, and then the Google or Amazons. But yeah, everybody have very different motivation. It's hard to say who is right or wrong. I think ultimately it lies on our own judgment. But where we play a role is we can definitely elect the right person, right? And at least that's what is in my hand.
If they're on the ballot,
If
back
they're
to the
on the ballot,
previous point.
exactly, yeah. If they're on there, yeah.
When everybody on the ballot seems like the wrong person, it's just like, what do you
Exactly,
do
yeah,
there?
yeah. What do you then do then? Yeah, yeah.
Uh, but so I guess, you know, us going back to the moon. Did you know that they plan to land the first woman on the moon as part of that first mission? And I was wondering what your thoughts were on that. Does that make it better or change anything for you?
So I honestly, um, I'm not female chauvinist. Like I do believe that, but I don't believe in this special status to be given to women. Um, Being in the hardware engineering, I myself, I'm like a loner there. But that doesn't make me ever feel that that women are not here because people didn't choose them. They're not there because they never wanted to be there. Or at least maybe I'm lucky that I am surrounded with people like that. But that's why I just don't like it publicized that they're putting the first women on moon. But is it because did they force the women to come here, or is it because women were not interested to get into this field, and maybe there were some things they didn't know, that why this industry is not appealing to them. And even in my own field, I've tried to figure that out when I go for some interviews, or when I get to meet the college students. They run so far away from hardware engineering, they will go into the software engineering thinking they have to just do coding, and hardware is hard, or um, it's different. um, so it's probably the perspective. I love the idea, but I would have been equally happy if that's the man going or women or whoever has a passion should go.
Oh,
Whoever loves
definitely.
the field.
And but I mean, part of it is kind of self-selection bias, right? You see somebody that looks like you or has a similar background as you doing something, then that makes you think, oh, I want to be just like that. But then if you don't see anybody that has the same
That's
background as you or what have you, that could very easily cause
that,
your thing to go in a different direction even before you become aware of it.
that's a great point. Yeah, I would agree, because you need some role models to even incite the young generation, right? That this is even possible, or sometimes the dreams or ideas can die inside when you don't see something out there that I can achieve. um, so yeah, you make a good point there. But I did not even know that, after even going to NASA visit, I didn't know that there was a woman who was going to the moon. That was recently somewhere I had read. um, when like these days there's a lot of things going on, hiring women, or in every company. That's where I read something like that. Oh, there is a first mission for a woman to go to the moon.
Yeah. It originally, the NASA had plans to send people back to the moon in 2028. Uh,
Okay.
the Vice President Mike Pence, he reconstituted this thing called the National Space Council, which has like representatives from several key places in the government. They have meetings each year. I mean, you have different times of the year, but last year, I think it was like in February, he announced that we were going to move it from 2028 to 2024, and that we would land the first woman and the next man on the moon by 2024. So that was sort of what the original announcement, as opposed to
I
an
see.
add-on.
So
But
so
have
that
you ever
yeah.
so about Elon Musk and SpaceX,
Mhm.
but have you heard of Gwen Shotwell?
No, I have not.
She is the president of SpaceX, and she's the one that actually uh, keeps the ship running while Elon's working on
Wow.
pushing stuff going on. But I heard her talk,
Okay.
and she says that one thing that motivated her to become an engineer, because she
Mhm.
was like a satellite engineer, was that she had saw another engineer come to her school whenever she was elementary kid, a female engineer, and she said, I wanted to be just like that, and that like sparked her motivation.
So
So I was wondering, uh, do you have opportunities to go to like elementary schools and say, hey, I'm a hardware engineer, this is what I do, and kind of plant those seeds?
yes, I think I had one opportunity to go to the elementary school, but it conflicted with my schedule. But I have gone to few in like there was an event in Houston in my office itself. So I volunteered a couple of times there, like where the freshmen from who were doing computer engineering or any engineering for that matter, they were mostly females. And I went there with the server, and I took another colleague of mine, and it was very hard easy they had no idea of if you ask for the concept of what hardware engineering even means. And so it was definitely something that did get in their minds, or I was like, okay, what do you do when people tell you that you are on internet, or there is something called cloud. Where does that cloud really is? What does it? So those are the simple kind of things I started, and I think it was pretty interesting. I got few of them who link to me on the LinkedIn and see that, to see how you can advance, and what your career will look like. But I would think I should pursue that going to middle school and elementary school next time too, because I'm in a very different kind of engineering. So
Yeah, I know you like actually build the things the bytes go through as opposed to
exactly, yeah,
uh,
yeah.
so I guess where does this whole space exploration thing fall in terms of your personal priorities? Like, this year we've had the wildfires in Australia, we've had the pandemic, we've had, kind of the protest. We're having like international conflict seems to be picking up. I mean, there's a lot of things going on right now.
Yeah. Hmm.
So how do you fit like exploring the universe and things like that into this whole wide range of competing priorities?
Right. So I think personally, I am driven by this uh, intangible desire to know, uh, to explore, what's out there. I think it's pretty vital for our whole, uh, probably the whole human spirit, in fact. So it's like we want to know that, know, we want to explore, know, like what are the hows and whys of the world. So this can be a distraction from all of this. If you remember that SpaceX takeoff that day, I was at a coffee shop, and all of a sudden I saw everybody shifting. That's where I saw the launch, and it was totally different, for some time. And then I came home and I listened to the whole president's uh, uh, message after that. It was pretty vital. I think it's pretty vital for my. Its cost is one thing which may drive all this, and I don't know how you separate the resources, but it should be up high there on the list of priorities, if not immediate. Of course, pandemic is the first thing. If you have to, safety and health of people or your family is the first thing to do. But this is not that far in the list. Should not be, because it is it's something that tells us where we are, what is our genetic relation to other stuff in the universe, or other planets, or galaxies, or whatever in the universe. So I'm not a very space linguistic person, but I do love knowing more and more about it. So, and I think we don't know enough yet.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. If you think back, I think like 200 years ago, astronomers figured out that there's electromagnetism, how electromagnetic waves propagate through space, and that is the same as light and same as radio, or, radio, we didn't really know about it. And then we figured out how to like actually create electromagnetic waves and detect them. And, we're able to create all these devices that we take for granted now, but it all came down to that fundamental concept, which
Exactly.
opened up this entire thing. And,
Yeah.
I like to say, if you're in like a room of a house and everybody in that house is in that same room and you never go out that room, there's some very fundamental basic things about that house that you will never know. But if you take one step out into the hallway, yeah, it becomes very clear. So
Very clear. Yes. Yeah.
I just wonder what fundamental things we may have been blinded ourselves to just because we've all been on the same place. We all live in like a 1G environment. We all live with like one atmosphere of pressure. We all have like essentially a 24-hour day, a 365 day year.
Yeah.
Um, what happens whenever you start changing those assumptions and the mind starts looking at the world from a completely different bias perspective?
Yeah, and I agree that, and you will probably find very 50-50 views on this because people do think that it's a waste of effort. We are spending so much money, and as you said, it's a pretty expensive thing to do. But for that reason, any innovation, even in my company, I mean, the thing we do, or what makes computers, why do you even need, you are fine with what you had earlier, right? If it was working, why do you need so much of computation or so much innovation in any field? And this is a field that is evolving, and I think it has just started the innovation, and it can get better and less expensive, but unless we pour some resources in it, it won't. But even in my own house, if I think my husband and I differ on this, so he thinks it's waste of time. What are we really learning from that? And my thing is, we have not even explored what we can do, and the scientific discoveries it can lead to. I don't know where carbon come from. I don't know, is moon really lifeless? And if it is, why? So, and will earth be one day like that? So these are just curiosity things which I think all of us are driven by.
And do you think, like, if you look out 500 years from now, and you take your most optimistic perspective,
Mhm.
and the most positive perspective, where do you think humanity is? Are we still stuck on the Earth, or have we branched out to other places in the solar system? Like, where do you think we are?
I think it will be definitely like something. Let's book a trip to go see the curvature of Earth from the space. It will be probably that affordable, like maybe this summer, instead of going to Disney World, let's go see how black the atmosphere is, or the space is. Uh, but can it be colonized, or maybe yes, because look at the globalization, right? Maybe not too many decades ago, where uh, between today and yesterday, how many people are traveling this time, and how we know about so many things, and everybody is mobile, uh, compared to what it was earlier. So in 500 years ago, I mean late or in future, I think it is definitely possible, but how inhabitable those places are, that all depends. Can it be sustained um, for us to live there? But I definitely think it will be something where you would just go and visit, and it will be that affordable, that or maybe there'll be weddings in universe, weddings in space happening, something like that. That is probably totally, I believe it.
And so if it was safe and affordable, you would go to space?
um I think I would, but I am a very safety is my personal thing, and I'm not a very avid risk taker. And it's not like once you have done it, it's you can go to space. You have seen that with even Apollo missions, right? Was one mission was successful, then other did not. So unless you have done it enough, even traveling with plane, it is pretty safe, but then we have seen mishaps, right? Even in this century. So but it has to get to that safety level for me to travel. But if it reaches that, then yes, I will.
And let's just probe a little bit to see where you feel that level might be. So let's say 1 million people went to space and came back without any incident. Is that safe enough?
So that also depends on the technology. Yeah, if I understand it, how it works, yes, I will probably travel. Right now we are in the age of, say, these self-driving cars, but I'm not the one who's going to drive it yet. I'm not there yet, because I probably know how things can go wrong, maybe, and not feel comfortable enough. But am I okay going into a heart surgery? Yes, because I know the surgeons have done it enough that I think even with their eyes closed, they can operate on your heart today. So,
I've actually driven in a Tesla from Austin to Houston on autopilot.
oh my goodness, I cannot do that. I
It
honestly
was
cannot.
it was really scary at first. It
Yeah.
took a while, and there was one part where there's road construction where it says you must take control now. And it's like,
Yeah, if you're not asleep by now, you know where the where how to come back. Yeah.
because sometimes you know, when they're doing road construction, they kind of try to take up the other lines. They paint new lines. It's not really clear, even to a human, where the
Exactly. So
lane is.
it's not that I don't believe in the technology, but I don't think we have the whole infrastructure still. You know, things were not built with this in mind. So it will take time for these errors to happen and then rectified before it can be safe, or maybe safe for me. so
Yeah,
yeah.
and it's kind of interesting thing because even if somebody else has their car on autopilot and they're driving next to you, you're still
Mhm.
sort of at risk. I mean,
Yeah.
like it's almost like maybe there needs to be autopilot streets and non-autopilot streets so that people can choose. And you know, you can make sure that the lines and everything are bright for the autopilot too.
Right, exactly. That's my only fear. I think the technology wise, probably the companies are investing enough to understand, you know, redundancy and the safety features of it. But I honestly don't believe that everybody is or things are paved for that yet. Or but it is probably because again, yeah, there are a lot of people who are driving and who believe it's safe, but I cannot take give control to somebody else right now.
That makes sense. Well, Sangeeta, I really enjoyed the conversation. I hope you did too.
I loved it, yeah, and I learned so much, and I'm going to go back and check on the topics you told me. So thank you so much.
Is there anything else you wanted to say before we, like some topic that you wanted to touch on that I didn't bring up, or?
um no, not really, I didn't think, but I think this is a very cool project you're doing. I'm going to go and watch your videos where I want to see what others think about this and how my views differ. It's always good to see that, you know, what others are thinking about this field, which I think is fantastic and, you know, very fascinating, and it should be more. I think it has a bright future. Space exploration is bright future. It's just getting started with these commercial companies coming in, as you said. So hopefully in our generation, it's a sustainable thing and not a history.
That sounds good. Well, you have a good rest of your day, and thank you again so much for helping me in my project.
Absolutely, my pleasure. You have a great day and happy Father's Day for tomorrow.
Oh, thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye bye.